Hello, everybody. This is Brian David Johnson, the guest editor for the IEEE Computer Magazine special issue on the world of making. Our approach as we were pulling together the stories for this edition is we looked all over the world and looked to people who were doing work in biology, in design, people who were exploring science and business, looking at making when it came to technology and entertainment, as well as education and culture. And the goal was to really get a snapshot of what making, in a very broad sense, what making looked like in the year 2014. And on our podcast today, we have Sue Faulkner. And Sue is in the middle of doing some really interesting research around making, why people make, who makes, and how they make. And it's a really, really rich bit of work. It should be said, I do work with Sue and have worked with her for many years at the Intel Corporation. Sue, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
So, Sue, if you could share with the audience, what is your background? You have an interesting kind of varied background when it comes to kind of research and also media. And then also, what brought you to the subject of making?
Well, so my background and what brought me to this subject are kind of intertwined. I have a background in documentary filmmaking. I have a degree from Stanford in documentary film and television production, and started working in Silicon Valley while I was in film school, actually, making portraits of people for the purposes of what we would now call ethnography, though in those days we weren't using that term yet. We called it consumer research. So I come at this from a film background, and one of the things that drew me to this work, when we started talking to girls and women about making, we heard over and over again these stories of young girls who were thwarted in some way from doing something they wanted to do. So, for instance, a middle school-aged girl in science class, and the teacher puts out all the stuff for an experiment, and the boys at the table grab everything. And the girl is given the job of documenting, writing, communicating about the experiment. And we heard from high school-aged girls on robotics teams who wanted to, they talked in these sort of wistful terms about how it was very rare for a girl to ever get to drive the robot. And this made me think back to when I was applying to film schools. And my choice came down to USC or Stanford. USC is an incredible school. It's a much bigger program. Stanford has a very small program. They can take maximum 12 people a year into their film program. And I thought, if I go to USC, there's always going to be somebody, probably a guy, who's going to say, I'll hold that camera for you. I'll operate that film editing equipment for you. And I didn't want any excuse for shying away from using the technology and learning how to use it. And so in thinking about these girls and these women who might not be getting the same opportunity as men to use the technology and learn about it and grow into technologists, I thought, well, okay, who gets to drive the robot here? Who gets to hold the camera? What would it mean for the future of computing if there were more women makers? And that's how I started this project.
Yeah, and it's a very important subject, of huge importance for the future of computing, the future of making, I would just say the future in general. But can you give us a little bit more detail about the work and your article? Your article is Women Who Make, and kind of really taking this sometimes uncomfortable but certainly important subject head on. So what did the project do, and what are some of the things that you learned?
Yeah, we set out to understand makers broadly, both men and women, and also to focus on women and girls who make and what it is that they care about making, what motivates them, what interests them, with an eye toward, could it be possible that through making and through girls and women's interest in making, there might be a way to bring more girls and women into the STEM fields, into science, technology, engineering, and math. We wanted to both deeply understand why people love making, but also think about, well, could that have implications for the future of computing?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things when it comes to diversity around, and this is a conversation that Sue and I have had for a while, that around diversity, that we know that diversity in systems is incredibly important, whether it be in economic systems and biological systems, and certainly when it comes to kind of computing and designing the systems that we need to design 5, 10, 15 years from now, we need a much more diverse input. And there's story after story that you hear as to the things that you chronicled and things that you've written about of how when people, and specifically when women and young girls come into maker spaces, when they come into the world of making, that those worlds are not specifically designed for them, or they haven't even been included in that design. And it can be incredibly off-putting. But at the same time, that you do have a whole generation of young women who are interested in making and who are kind of pushing on that and looking for that seat at the workbench, if you will. Have you seen anything that people could do? Is there any action in some of the things that you saw in your research that for you seemed something that, in the engineering community and certainly in this audience, that a way that people could start to take action?
Yeah, there are some ways that we think we can engage more girls and women in making. As you said, when girls are given the opportunity to make something, they love it. They like it. We have quantitative data that shows girls and boys, sort of tween age, are equally interested in making. And we heard stories about, girls who went to maker camp over the summer and loved it, but then the next year they didn't want to go back. And it seems that what happens there, as girls get older, and there's a lot of research that shows this, they become less engaged with science and technology. And I think that is often because when they do go back to maker camp, for instance, if it's dominated by boys, it's just not as fun an experience. So one of the things that we've seen is that when you provide girls with an environment that's all girls, like Tech Girls, which is run by the YWCA and has a great program, and we visited many times the Tech Girls program in San Jose. And they provide an environment where it's all girls, where the girls get to come up on their own with an idea for what they want to make, which is hugely important for everyone who makes. That's part of the appeal of making, is you come up with something that you're interested in, and in the course of pursuing that, you're going to learn all sorts of things. And so it's, instead of being presented with, you need to learn something, you're presented with, I really want to make a pink and purple unicorn that lights up when it comes in contact with another unicorn that's my friend, that's my unicorn's friend. And so having that kind of opportunity to have a space that's inclusive, that makes girls feel welcome and is populated also with people who can facilitate and be supportive. Those are incredibly important. Encouraging parents to embrace the mess and engage in making with their sons and daughters is really important. Aligning with current fads. Not every girl wants to make a pink or purple unicorn. Some girls are going to really, hate the idea of that. But if that's what is the trend or the fad at that moment with that group of girls, more power to them. Let them work on what they want to work on. Developing initiatives that give girls more access to female mentors and makers their own age is very important. I interviewed a woman who is a software engineer at a company, a big corporation, and she is a maker in the evenings. She loves to make. And she told me she has never in her life ever had a female mentor. So that is, that's one of the most important things that we can do is provide girls with role models and mentors who can help in this area.
So Sue, this is such a huge and hugely important area. Where can our listeners go to get more information? I mean, certainly there's your article that you gave us for the IEEE Computing Magazine. Is there a place that they can go to start to dive in deeper?
Yes, so Intel has produced a report that is called Makers. There's a capital H in there. Engaging girls and women in technology through making, creating, and inventing.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for your article and also for joining us here on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. As you said, this is such a hugely important area, and I think an area it's not only the right thing to do, it's actually the thing that we need to do to get a generation of diverse engineers to actually be able to build and solve the problems that we're going to need. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.